Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, June the 15th. It's our 10th and final day of the American Percussion Seminar. And wow, what a 10 days it has been. Really so blessed to be surrounded by so many amazing musicians, guest artists, faculty that are so giving of their music, their artistry, their dedication to education. It's really been inspirational for me, and I hope for all the students too, as well, of course. Our next session is going to be with Stacy Loggins, a longtime dear friend of mine. Really so happy that he was available and able to do this for us, because I know it's going to knock it out of the park. And I put him on the last day for a reason. So I'm super happy about that. Before we get started, I want to mention something that I'd like for you to do. First off, Emily and I went this morning and picked up the American Percussion Seminar t-shirts, and they look awesome. I mean, you know, sometimes you pick up shirts and go, oh, okay, they look really good. And I'll show them to you maybe tonight at our final session. But I'm hoping that when we're able to send these shirts and the prizes that you're going to get after this week, that you'll take a picture of it, of course, and not only promote it on social media with American Percussion Seminar, maybe tag me or some of the other faculty, but also take a picture. And if you send it to us, Evelina is going to put a composite picture together, basically put us all in the same room for a picture. So we can all have it together. I think that'll be super nice. And then if we get to all go to PASIC in November, like I was just telling Stacy, that everybody has to wear their shirt and we'll have a party or something. You know. You can bring your shirt. Maybe you don't have to wear it. Okay. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Stacy Loggins. Well, I really don't know where to begin. Stacy did his undergraduate at Cameron University in Oklahoma, then came to East Carolina University, where I was teaching at the time, and so fortunate that he came there and did his master's there. And right out of school, he took an audition for the Navy band. And lo and behold, he didn't get it into the band. And he came back and he said, they seemed to like everything I did, but I didn't play drum set as well as they wanted me to. And he said, they even took me to the side and said, there's going to be another audition coming if you're interested. So I remember Stacy working seriously hard on his drum set chops for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then there was another audition and he got into the band and stayed there. How many years, Stacy?
26.
26 years, yeah. Retired from U.S. Navy Band, Principal Percussionist, just an amazing musician. Stacy and I used to also play in a steel drum band that we played, usually about 4 nights a week in the summer up and down Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina area. And what a blast we had. So much fun making music and also just really getting to know each other. So it's just great to have a dear friend. All of you are dear friends. Goodness, that's kind of how I selected all these guests and faculty. And so I'm excited for your presentation, Stacy. So if everyone could please welcome Stacy Loggins.
Appreciate it, guys. Cool. So yeah, like you said, I did 26 years in the band. So my, focused military band world is really interesting and kind of a real passion of mine. So what I put together was a clinic for you guys about auditioning for military bands. And this will actually not only be like focus on military bands in later on in the actual clinic. We'll be talking about auditioning concepts just in general, of how you kind of prepare for an audition and think about it in your process kind of from beginning to end. But I will focus at the beginning and kind of throughout just talk about military bands in general. It's kind of an option that I think a lot of folks have really not really considered in the past as far as employment, because you just really don't know a whole lot about military bands, how that whole thing works, what you have to do to get in one, and if it's, what's it similar to. It's just something that not a lot of people have a kind of a lot of information about. So we'll talk about that at the very beginning. I have a little slideshow I put together for you guys, and it's got some videos in there, kind of show you what they're all about, some videos of a couple of different groups, and then we'll get to some talking about the session. So without further ado, most of this is about auditioning pretty much for military band. I got to share my screen here, so hopefully you guys can see it. It's been a little bit squirrely here.
You'll probably have to share the sound and optimize the video again.
Yeah, gotcha there. Cool. All right, let's see what we got. Whoops. All right, now like I've said, I've lost everybody here because the video wasn't working. Can you guys all see that?
We can see it fine, and we can see you, Stacy.
Oh, you can. Okay, great. All right, so obviously this is the homepage. I put some pictures of this is some things that we did in the band. I have actually quite a few more, obviously more photos of having a 26-year experience there, but just some of the highlights of what I was able to do in the band there. So a lot of different pieces with a lot of different things right there. Now email's right there too, stacyloggins@gmail.com. Please do not hesitate to email me anytime if you have any follow up after this thing is this seminar is over. If there's other questions that aren't going to come to you right now that you have thought about, I mean, just feel free to contact me at any point. I'll respond as best I can. This is also, it can be interactive. So if you guys have questions at any point during this the clinic, please just let me know. I mean, I'm happy to answer anything along the way as those questions pop up, so you don't forget them. Sounds good. So homepage. All right, so the military band. This is I've got a couple of videos here just to kind of show you guys what they're about. Military bands are interesting. Most of them, there's bands actually are quite around the world, and we'll talk about the differences between the premier bands and the regional bands. But this is just right here, a couple of videos showing you an overview of a couple of things that military bands do. The one on the left is U.S. Army Field Band. They are here in DC, the DC area, in Fort Meade, Maryland, not too far north of DC. And then the one on the right here is, of course, the Navy Concert Band, which I was a part. And that's just a promo video showing we were going to go on tour just a couple of years ago. And just to let you know, I'll probably say we and stuff like that a lot. Even though I'm not in the band anymore, I did it for so long. It's just kind of natural for me just to say we when I'm talking about the group. So here's this first thing that I grabbed from the...
The difference between this and a DCI Corps is we have only about 2 weeks to put the show together.
Everyone here went through basic combat training, so they all have basic military marching skills. We're just kind of trying to put that together with playing your instrument at the same time, and we really put it together in just a few short weeks, and it turned out really nicely.
These are world-class musicians that are used to sitting in a concert hall. And what we're asking them to do here is to stand, but then you have to also march and play.
I think the Norwegians are going to love it. The music was purposely picked to be very American. We have a lot of film scores. We have Star Wars and Incredibles. We also have a classic jazz piece, which the Norwegians love, Sing, Sing, Sing. And we pay a little homage to the Norwegians with their children's folk song that we do an American arrangement to.
Music, of course, is the international language, but it really can connect us, even all these different militaries from all over the world. It's very cool.
All right, just going to play this other video for you. They're both, this one's short, even shorter, I think. All right, just a couple of videos to kind of show you the breadth of music that the bands perform. You know, you've got your marching component on the left, which was actually a military tattoo. That's something that a lot of times are hosted in other countries. Sweden and Norway are probably the two most prominent places that hold a tattoo. And a tattoo is just a place where military bands from literally all over the world come together and do a whole big concert for everybody. It's usually like 3 hours long. It's a lot of rehearsals and like a week-long event with a lot of fellowship with the military components. So that's pretty interesting part. And then of course I showed the other part, showing the band, the wealth of, you have soloists. We play a lot of classical literature too, also band literature. So there's a big spread in the type of music that you have in a military band. Okay, a couple of things here for you. Oh, we did that already. All right. I don't know what is happening right now. Next page. All right, cool. Now, just a couple other things briefly, just to show you guys. Another big spread. This is a big events that happens in DC. Is every branch does a special thing in the summer. The Marines have their parade that they do on their grounds, and it's a bunch of marching exhibitions and music as well, and classical stuff as well. This is a thing on the left that the Navy does called a Concert on the Avenue. It's a special program they do in the summers for tourists mostly, because obviously in DC it's a really popular tourist time, so they put on special concerts. This kind of just shows you this is a very joint group. But before we had some of the more classically oriented, more serious works, and this is much more pop oriented. This girl singing, this is a piece in French, and it just shows this is a combined effort showing the concert band, the chorus, the rock band, and I think that might be it for this particular concert. So this is another piece for you.
Un bouquet des roses, chanson qui parle que d'une chose, amour, amour, tremblement de terre, collier qui porte mon bonheur, amour, toujours. Amour, t'es là, amour, je cherche ton chemin. Amour, c'est toi, amour, pourquoi tu t'y caches de moi? Rêve des bisous, de mots qui caressent le cou. Amour, amour, caresse le cou. Monde à l'envers, qui va porter mon bonheur. Amour, je cherche ton chemin, amour, c'est toi. Amour, je sais pas vraiment, amour, pourquoi? Amour, pourquoi tu t'y caches de moi? Chaque matin je me lève très tôt pour aller au boulot. Ce matin, j'ai l'impression que quelqu'un va répondre à ma question. Amour, t'es là, amour, je cherche ton chemin, amour, c'est toi. Amour, je sais pas vraiment, amour, t'es fou. Amour, je te cherche, t'es où? Amour, pourquoi? Amour, pourquoi tu te caches de moi? Chaque matin je me lève très tôt pour aller au boulot. Ce matin, j'ai l'impression que quelqu'un va répondre à ma question. Amour, t'es là, amour, je cherche ton chemin. Amour, c'est toi. Amour, je sais pas vraiment, amour, t'es fou. Amour, je te cherche, t'es où? Amour, pourquoi? Amour. Amour, t'es là, je cherche ton chemin. Amour, c'est toi. Je sais pas vraiment, amour, t'es fou. Je te cherche, t'es où? Amour, pourquoi? Amour, pourquoi tu te caches? Amour, pourquoi tu te caches? Pourquoi tu te caches? Amour, pourquoi tu te caches de moi? De moi, de moi.
This last one I'll just play a minute, and then we'll get to some other things for you guys. Whoa, what just happened?
Guys, can we run this tune again? I think it sends out peace and home to everybody out in the fleet.
Can you still hear that?
All good.
Okay.
Mark Twain told the stories of Huckleberry Finn running round in those hills I grew up in, where the bluebirds fly that taught me how to sing. And if you can't show me, then it doesn't mean a thing in Missouri. It's home to Harry S. Truman and the Pony Express.
All right, let's give it back to my presentation wherever it was. There we go. All right, so that just kind of gives you guys just an idea of the breadth of what military bands do. I think people probably don't really know that there's so many different types of music involved with that. That last group, the Country Current, is actually President Biden's favorite group of all the bands. So he has them there at the White House a lot of times for their picnics and things like that. So pretty cool. Never get past all that. All right. So the military bands, what do they do? Right? Military bands provides presidential support. The ones in DC, the ones around the regional bands around the world don't obviously do that because unless the president visits. But the kind of primary job if you're a DC band is presidential support. And that can mean playing at the White House when they have functions there for other dignitaries, playing ceremonies when people come to visit from other countries. We get presidents from other countries, heads of state from other countries, and high-ranking military officials from other countries, and ambassadors and diplomats that come in. And you have to play for a lot of the ceremonies that they have there. Military funerals, obviously a big thing. If anybody's been to DC, you've probably been to Arlington National Cemetery or seen it on TV. If not, all the headstones lined up in rows and files and ranks. Every service plays funerals there. That's a big part of the job, to play for fallen heroes. Obviously international relations, want to talk a little bit about that. You know, you go to there's bands around the world, regional bands that are just, there to promote the US to other countries. Every band goes on a tour. You can kind of think of the band as a big public affairs group. They go and they play and promote their particular branch. So the Navy band that I was in would go and play and promote the Navy throughout the country. And you'd always tour in places where people may not see the Navy. So a lot of times not on the coast, in the Midwest and interior parts of the country where people might not have a big Navy contingency. And likewise, the Army bands and Air Force bands would tour around the country as well to promote their particular services. Fosters patriotism throughout the US and throughout the world. And for the academy support, there's our bands that are specifically assigned to military academies. There's a Naval Academy in Annapolis, not too far from here, actually. It's about an hour down the road. And they have their own band that plays for that essentially university. And the Coast Guard band is in Connecticut, and they're housed at their academy as well. So they do support the academy there. Bands are basically broken down into two elements, like I told you before: premier bands and regional bands. The premier bands are the bands that are mostly in DC, and the Coast Guard bands are premier band as well. And the other bands are around the world. So the 11 premier bands. Of those 11 premier bands, it's several bands in different, 2 in the Navy, I think it's 4 in the Army, which we'll go through in just a second, and a few other groups. Premier bands have a different status than regional bands. When you audition for a premier band, you have permanent duty to that specific band. You have to actually audition for any of the military bands around the world, regardless of the branch. You have to audition for them. But if there's an audition for a premier band, which are mostly housed here, you go to the audition. If you win the audition, you get permanent assignment to that band for the remainder of your career, as long as you'd like to stay. So you can leave if you kind of wanted to, but most people generally don't. And those bands are almost all here. Most premier bands are broken down in several different units, which is different than regional bands too. I'll say that in a minute. They have a concert band. Everybody's got a concert band, and everybody has a ceremonial band. Most of them have a chorus. You saw that in that last video that I played for you guys. A lot have jazz ensembles too. It's usually a big band jazz ensemble. A couple of them have country bands. A couple of them have pop bands, rock bands or pop bands. They play a lot of different music, actually, kind of bridge the gap between some more progressive jazz stuff to new age things. They also play pop music. They play rock. They play soul, funk, and all that stuff, pop stuff. A couple of groups have string ensembles. The Marine Band has a string ensemble, and so does the Air Force. I think the Army does too, so they have a couple of string ensembles. And then there's chamber ensembles that are kind of sprinkled around everywhere. Everybody's got a woodwind quintet, brass quintets, quartets, smaller groups that they have, because those groups actually perform functions at other events too, where maybe the whole band can't go. And one unique thing is the Army Band has the Herald trumpets. So that's a very unique thing. They play at the White House all the time. The guy who actually is the capital of the leader of the Herald trumpets lives down the street from me. So I get to talk to him a lot, and they're at the White House all the time, and they have a drum contingency with them. The premier bands are much larger. Like most have about 150 people in the command, and that's a lot more than regional bands. When you win the Audition 2, you have to go to boot camp, but beyond that, you're automatically promoted to E6 the day you leave boot camp, which is for enlisted folks a pretty decent rank. It's higher than middle, and what that guarantees you actually is retirement, which is a lot of places you don't get. So it guarantees you a 20-year career, and you actually get to retirement after that. All right, so now talk about a little about regional bands. The difference in those are much smaller. When you go to regional band, you have to audition for it as well, like I spoke of before. They have about 25, 60 people, 50 people. A lot of them have about 52, a little bit smaller. Some are in the 30s, some are in the 50s. It just kind of depends on where they're located. And they do everything. They're not divided into different groups, as like I talked about with the chorus and the jazz group. No, they have come in as one full group, and they pull from that group to create other little small groups as needed. So they might have like a woodwind quintet or a brass quintet, or little groups that they send to do different things. Their function is different. They have more support and parade support, patriotic support for people. They don't play at the White House because they're not in DC, but they do support whatever command and local military culture that they're close to, and they can be placed anywhere around the world. Generally, those folks have a 3 to 5 year commitment. And then they get rotated somewhere. That's what you call it. So maybe a band will be in Italy. You'll be placed there for 3 years, and then you move. You get transferred to another band somewhere else, and then you might get transferred to another band somewhere else 3 or 5 years later. So you'll actually end up moving around quite a bit. It's more like the typical military where you spend time in one place and have to move to another place. After they also hit boot camp, they go to the music school, which I think I'll bring up later too. And the Armed Forces School of Music is about 2 hours from here, and they study their instruments for about 6 months before they actually get placed in a band. It's called A school. That's just kind of a military thing that has to happen. And then they get automatically promoted to E3, which is not quite guarantee you retirement, but it does guarantee you a better paying rank and forward mobility so that you can actually reach E6 to have a retirement. So that's the kind of the difference between the regional band and the premier band. It's a big kind of a step difference there. All right, the regional band, premier bands. So premier band, Navy band, obviously I kind of show the Navy a lot since I was in it. So Navy band is a premier band, and the Annapolis band, which is where the Naval Academy is also a premier band. Those are the two Navy premier bands. The Army has 4, and they're all right here too. Well, 3 of them are here. Fort Myer, the Army band is at Fort Myer. It's actually about 3 miles from where the Navy band is. The field band is in Maryland, so it's a bit of a farther away, and that is the band that tours. The regular Army band does not tour at all. They play only here, whereas the field band tours extensively. Probably 4 or 5 months, 5 months out of the year, I bet they're on tour, which is significant, maybe even more. I mean, all the time. They tour very, very extensively. The West Point band is in West Point, New York. They support the West Point Military Academy. And then the Old Guard, Fife and Drum Corps, which I have a video of in a little bit to show you guys. It's pretty cool. They're in Fort Myer, Virginia as well. And they're the guys, if you've ever seen them, where they wear the red coats and the little white wigs and the 3-cornered hats. That's the Old Guard. The Air Force has 2 as well. Air Force Band in DC, again, it's like 3 miles the other way. All the bands are fairly closely located to each other, which is kind of bizarre. So we all kind of know each other, which is pretty cool. Air Force Band is in the Colorado, again, with the Academy. So that's kind of what we talked about with Academy support. All the academies have their own bands that are, connected with them. Marine Corps has a Marine Band, President's own Marine Band in DC. Their building is literally across the street from the Navy Band's building. So oftentimes we'll just walk out, and it's 1 block up past this little park and talk to those guys. And then Marine Drum and Bugle Corps is another block up from that. So all these really close together, and Marine Drum and Bugle Corps is obviously a Drum and Bugle Corps marching component. The Coast Guard has only 1 band. This is very interesting, and they're not in DC. They are in New London, Connecticut. And the reason they have 1 band and they're kind of a completely different animal than the other bands, because they're under a different structure. They're under Homeland Security. So that whole umbrella of Homeland Security also involves the Coast Guard, whereas every other branch is in the Department of Defense. And that's different, a completely different funding, completely different everything. So very, very different. But the Coast Guard still is a premier band. So you get that premier status and everything I said about the premier bands earlier. Let's run through this. The Navy, and then here we go with the regional bands. Again, there's quite a few of them. 9 fleet bands. We call them fleet bands. You're in the Navy because fleet, Navy. And then there's Army bands. Many around the world, there's National Guard bands, reserve bands, and they're kind of split up in a way. The reserve bands, National Guard bands are kind of weekend things. If somebody wants to be in one, you can be a student, or you could be, you just want to be in the military and you can get a little bit of money for that. You actually can get retirement to that if you're in a reserve band as well. And you get a lot of benefits from being in the military, though you're not quite active duty. It's different benefits, but you do get benefits. And you just want to play your horn because it's fun at night or whatever, then you can join, the reserve bands and National Guard bands. They also have to have auditions. You can't just go up and sign up and be in them. You have to actually audition for one. So again, as we're going to get through this and talk about auditioning in a minute here, just showing you how the many different opportunities of different organizations you have to be in that you still have to audition for. So the Air Force, of course, as well as another 11 bands. There's several National Guard bands, and you can see the Marine Corps has 10, and the Coast Guard, again, just the one band. It's really interesting, but that's how it works. All right, so let's get into some auditioning. Reasons for auditioning. That's the first thing people kind of think. Why do I want to take an audition? What's it all about? What am I thinking about doing? The first thing, obviously, anybody really wants to take an audition for is because they want a job. It could be that they want to go to school. That's another thing. I think I put that on here too. Depends on kind of what age you are. But when people are thinking about being professionals, they want a job. That's the point. The other reason may be because you want to practice auditioning, which I highly encourage. Practice auditioning. Nobody I know here has won their first audition. Most people take multiple auditions before they win one because it's kind of an art form into itself. You have to get better at it. And the only way to get better at auditioning is practicing. And a lot of times you're most relaxed when you practice an audition too, because you're only there to get the experience, not necessarily to want the job so badly that your nerves get so much involved. So it's really nice to be able to practice an audition. I would encourage anyone, if there's an audition that you want, a field that you're interested in getting into as you're continuing school, beyond school, or getting ready to go into school. If there's any field that you're interested in, find an audition that's somewhere near that you can afford to take. I mean, you don't want to, if you're going to practice taking an audition, you're not going to, fly across the country unless you're wealthy to take an audition somewhere if you don't think you want to do the job. But if there's something that's close that you can drive to or get the experience from, take the audition just so you can get that experience and understand the process, which we're going to get into here in a second. So I kind of broke down the audition process the way I see it in a bunch of different categories. The first thing, if you start off in the top, that lighter blue color is the discovery part. That's kind of when you're going to be talking about what is there an audition? Where is it? Like, what am I going to do? There's how is it organized? How does it all start? What's my thinking about the very beginning of the audition process? And we'll get into more details about that in just a second. But the audition process, discovery, what do I think about when I want to start? Research. That's the next section. This is the one that people forsake. And I cannot tell you strongly enough that you really have to focus on your research. And we'll get into why as we continue to go through this. But a lot of times people are fantastic players. They're great. They can ram a ton of notes and they play their instrument so well. However, they haven't done their research and they don't fit in for what they're looking for at the actual audition. And that is key if you actually want to win the audition. Then you have beginning preparation. We'll get into this, how that works too. You're preparing for your audition, what you're going to do, how you're going to plan. And then we have what I call the active preparation. And some of these can be moved around, not really moved around, but they may join because it depends on what kind of audition you're having. If you have a recorded audition or if you have a live round audition, then that active preparation will be much larger and completely together. But if there's a recorded audition that comes before the final round, then you're going to have a different story with how that works. Recommend 3 to 6 months or even longer if necessary to prepare for an audition. It's a lengthy process and you have to be very detailed about it. This gets people really in a lot of trouble by not allowing themselves enough time to prepare for an audition. 3 to 6 months. Now, sometimes you can't control that because sure, audition's going to pop up and you just find out about it and it's 2 months from now or it's a month from now, and you have to make your own decisions about whether you think you might want to take it or not. Should I try? And we'll get into a little bit more about that in a little bit. But if you have any chance at all to prepare in a lengthy fashion, you should give yourself as much time as possible. 3 to 6 months. Cool. So now we're in the discovery unit. So this is what I was talking about earlier. What do we need to do? We need to find out what's going on. So how do we find the auditions? I mean, sometimes they're hard to come by. Now, and also I was talking about the band earlier too. This auditions aren't just for classical players. You know, auditions, the bands, all the concert band auditions are pretty much classical in nature, but there are drummers in every other unit. Each one of those specialty groups, we call them, the chorus, the jazz group, the country group, the rock band, the pop band, those string ensembles. Well, they don't have a drummer, but any of the smaller groups like that, the specialty groups, have their own drummer. And they have their own specialized audition. And that's one of the reasons that we're happy to be able to, hopefully we wanted to put this together so you can see that it's not just an orchestral audition. That's the idiosyncrasies that I'm very interested in, is because the audition spans much more than just classical percussion. And you'll see that soon. So band specific websites, go on the band's website. Everyone who has a website, and of course everyone does these days, has either a career section, an opportunity section, an audition section, you know, somewhere on their website. It's usually in the top half header and easy to find. You can click on that, you will get, boom, you will get information about the audition if there is one available. And usually it'll say like no current vacancies or whatever. Oh, and two, that brings me up to that thing I forgot to say about the premier bands. Premier bands only audition, well, actually any of the bands really. They only audition when there's a vacancy. You can't just, you know, gone are the days when you could get out of high school and then, or out of whatever, and go to the military and enlist and say, hey, I want to be a drummer in one of the military bands. That's not really the case anymore. It was, you know, many years ago, 20 years ago, when I first got in, that was the case. You could just go sign up and you would get placed somewhere. But the competition is so fierce these days for job opportunities that they just don't have openings, and they only have auditions when there's an opening. They don't just let people in. I was talking to this guy who's a detailer out at in Tennessee. A detailer is a person who kind of organizes auditions and finds out which band needs how many people for whichever instrument, and, you know, puts out auditions and stuff like that around the world. That's what the military detailer does. And he was telling me that 83% of Navy percussionists have advanced degrees. Can you believe that? 83% around the world, of all the people around the world. So, you know, people are not getting jobs right out of high school. People are getting jobs when they get degrees and they audition for them. So just let you know the competition is really, really fierce, which is why you really have to focus on your audition if you want to win one. So check out the band website, check out musical chairs. You know, everybody knows these. Audition Cafe, probably. Some bands host things on Craigslist, which is cool, but you have to pay for that. And there are rules about how the military is allowed to advertise depending on your branch. So you'll see some in Craigslist, some not. Doesn't always work. PAS website, some puts things there too. I know that the Navy band contacts major schools throughout the country personally. Well, it sends a flyer out and says, we've got an audition, please post this at your school. So you can find out that way. You can also talk to your professors. Most of the guys in the band know, you know, a lot of people around the world, around the country, and, you know, advertise. When you have an opening, you want to get the biggest pool possible of people to go and take your audition. You don't want to have, like, you know, if we can only get 10 or 15 guys to go, I want 80 or 90 or 100 people to go so I can have a big wide pool to choose from. So you really try to spread the word in that way. And the biggest way people find out about auditions is social media. I mean, I think Facebook is probably the number one, where it gets posted everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter gets posted as well. So you can kind of keep your eyes peeled and run through those for different audition possibilities. I do know that auditioning for drum set has been a source of, advertising for drum set has been a source of stress for a lot of the bands here, because most of the drum set players don't look at musical chairs and Audition Cafe and stuff. And if they don't hear on social media or whatever school they're at, they don't necessarily know. So I know that's been a interesting process. So I am interested, you know, now that you guys have my email, if you have feedback as to drum set players, if any of you guys are drum set players, and how do you find out about auditions? Because I know everybody in DC here would love to figure out how that works and tap into it a little bit better, so you guys can all know about what's going on and have better opportunity to audition for one of the bands here. And then you can go to these instrument specific pages, obviously International Musician, percussion auditions, and the percussion room. Those are other places where you go where you can find out about auditions. Cool. All right. So you found this ensemble online. So what do you discover? You go and find what group you want to. You found the audition. It's the Navy band. It's the Marine band. You go to the Marine band page. I want to audition for the Marine band. You go check it out, and you find out, and you get the criteria for your audition. What do you have to do? First of all, where is the audition? Is it someplace you can actually get to in a reasonable time? When is the audition? This is probably the biggest key too. right? I know most of the military bands try to have auditions that are in the summer or possibly like, January, February, because you feel like the students who anybody who's going to audition out of a school is going to finish up their coursework in December, and they're going to be on Christmas break, and then they're going to have a big span of time where they can actually practice. Or you want to have it in the summer, late in the summer, because you have the summer to practice. They might have it, they hardly ever have auditions in May or anything like that, because people are working on their juries and recitals and all this stuff. Nobody's going to have time to practice. So you have to kind of gauge that audition when people can actually go. You got to find out what's required. What do I have to do? When are the deadlines? Because auditions require you, for military band auditions, usually 2-step process. You have to send a resume or a cover letter or references or something like that to your to the band that you want to audition for at a certain time to show that you're interested. And sometimes you'll have to have a tape and all that. We'll get into a little bit of that a little bit later too, about tapes and stuff, but there's always deadlines for materials, some sort of materials, and it varies between the different services. So you have to make sure you pay attention to deadlines, because if you miss them, you're out. They're not going to go say, hey, oh, sorry, he was only a day late, or he turned it in a few hours late. No, they will automatically think that you weren't paying attention, and you'll be out. So you have to obviously make sure when materials are due. Is it live or is it recorded? The most recent Navy band audition, there's a percussion audition that's actually happening, I think, in live round is in 2 weeks. The the recording round was about a month ago or a month and a half ago or something like that. So there's two different in that round. Okay, there was a tape round, recorded round, and then there's a live round. Do I have to make a recording? Not everybody requires that. They did right now because of COVID. So, auditioning in person has been kind of tricky, but that's all coming back now because people are getting vaccines and stuff. Prior to that, the Navy band had a cattle call. Everybody, whoever wants to audition, they can come. You got to send your resume and you can come, and you send by a certain date. We know who's coming. We have an audition live round every time. Everybody's there. Marine band always says tapes. Some number of the Army bands take tapes. The Air Force bands sometimes take tapes. The drum set players always take tapes. So anybody who wants to audition for one of those specialty groups, like I talked about earlier, you're going to have to make a tape. And I say tape, recording. So that can be either video or audio. A lot of the time they give you the option. If you ever have an option, always make a videotape if there's a choice. If there's not a choice, then obviously you do whichever one they say. The reason is they're very particular about what they're looking at and what they're looking for. They want to see you. The drum set players, drum set groups want to see you. That audition is never behind a screen. It's always playing with the group. And they're going to want to see how you are as a player and visually look at you. And it's going to give you a leg up, believe it or not, as opposed to somebody that they can't look at. Now, the video has to be polished, but it is still going to be your best chance to actually get invited to a live round. Do you have enough time to prepare? This is probably the single biggest thing that gets folks, is not allowing enough time. You have to allow enough time. You have to have, like I said, 3 to 6 months. You have to map everything out that you're going to do, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And you have to make sure that you physically, what's going on in your life? Is there a wedding you're going to do? Are you planning a show right now? Is there a festival that's coming up that you want to attend that's going to preclude you from being able to get to the audition? Are you having some life-changing event that's happening? There's all kinds of things. There's school going on, recitals, juries, blah, blah, blah. You have to check out your own schedule and make sure you actually have enough time to prepare, because lack of preparation is the worst thing you can do for an audition. You will not advance. Do you have constraints? Like, do you have access to instruments? How am I going to perform? You're not a trumpet player that you carry your instrument with you all the time. You actually have to get hold of a mallet instrument. You need some snare drums. You need tambourine. You might need timpani. You need a drum set. You need all these instruments, access to them. How do I get those? Is there a way for me to access that? If you're in school, of course, you got the school, you got all that stuff. But a lot of people that audition for the band are not in school anymore. They got their degrees and they're freelancing, or they're doing whatever, but they're not in school. So you really got to make sure that you've got access to instruments. Like I talked about earlier, the money and how do I get the music? Luckily today, that's easy. Almost everybody posts their music online, so it makes it pretty simple for you to actually grab the music. But these are just things that you need to think about when you're going to take an audition. It can't just be, I'm just going to go take the audition. A lot of thought and preparation has to go into this. A little piece by the Navy Band. I'm talking about looking for an ensemble online. I think this was put out about a year ago. So yeah, research and find the guys online.
In the aftermath.
That's what you have to do. And then you can see how they play and what kind of style they use. And that can help you understand what you're going to be auditioning for. Now, different types of audition requirements. Orchestral band. The concert band and the concert and ceremonial bands, and all the groups have very similar requirements. If you want to be in the concert band, then you're going to have to play orchestral and band excerpts. It's important. They will always have that. You're going to play with traditional grip, and you have to play some sort of rudimental exercise. Now, I actually sent Mark Thier a list of actually a lot of kind of a compilation of different audition lists that I found. One is current, actually the very first one on that list. You're going to have a link to it that you can download from the Google Drive folder, and you'll be able to just download this whole thing. It's about 103 pages, actually. It's quite extensive, I think, of several different, most current auditions, probably within the past, I think, 6 months or so. So
Stacy, I'm going to jump in on you here.
Please.
Guys, he sent this to me last night. I opened it up, typically looking for a 3 to 5 page handout.
Yeah, it's huge.
And here is the Bible of auditions for military bands. It would be valuable for you as a teacher, valuable for you as obviously a possible participant, or just knowledge of understanding how the whole thing works. So I highly recommend that you download it. Maybe not print it right now, but keep it on your your computer or iPad or whatever, because it's an amazing resource. Thank you so much, Stacy.
Oh, absolutely. So it shows like and it varies too. You'll have premier band auditions on there, and then there's also some regional band auditions. There's some specialty group auditions, and it just kind of shows the list. Cover letters, the page telling you what you have to bring to the auditions, just so you can prepare in advance. You kind of know what's going on with any audition of any group that you might want to audition for. So every group does ceremonies. All of them, they all do ceremonies at some point. You will have to, regardless of which group you're in. Even if you're a drum set player with one like the rock band or something, you're going to have to do a ceremony. When they have the inaugural parade, when the new president is selected, that's a 99-piece band, and there's not enough people in the concert band to make that up. So they supplement it with like all groups from all over. Use about 11 drummers on that too. And also, if there's big parades, like a lot of times if there's a visiting head of state, the president of Japan's coming or something, you'll play at the White House, and you have to have a really big group. So you'll have to supplement with other folks. So at some point, everybody's going to do a ceremony. Everybody's going to play on a rope drum. Everybody's got to play with traditional grip. So different than an orchestra. It's obviously not a requirement there, but in the military bands, it is. So if you don't know how to play traditional, most people do these days if they're in marching band. But if you don't, it's something you would start practicing now so you can get that under your hands, because you will have to audition actually on a piece playing with traditional grip. You also have to play drum set too. As we talked about earlier, that first audition I took for the Navy band, I didn't win, right? Because I couldn't play drum set well enough. So you do have to do that. Now, not all auditions ask for drum set, but most do, because people have to take smaller groups to different places to play, and you kind of have a big wide variety of things that you have to do musically, and drum set will be included in that. Same thing with timpani. Not all groups require you to play timpani on an audition, but some do. And some have timpani's very specific audition chairs. Air Force Band, Army Band, and the Army Field Band all have specific timpani auditions. So they'll audition just for timpani like you would an orchestra. Difference though is you will, again, have to play traditional grip at some point, have to play some drum set, and have to play orchestral excerpt. So you still, all these things I have listed on the screen right now, you're going to have to do if you have a band or ceremonial audition. We'll skip that for now. All right. So,
hey Stacy, before you go on,
yes,
and maybe I'm getting ahead of you just a little bit, and if I am, just tell me to be quiet. But is this a good time to speak about like the most important information that people would ask, like about benefits? What's the workload? How long, if you're in one of these groups, how long will you work a day, and where do the salaries range, et cetera?
Oh, absolutely. So the benefits are actually pretty cool. My wife and I often talk about how we feel like we won the lottery being in this group here. It's like there's extensive benefits. You get obviously free medical and dental benefits. Medical all around, surgery, whatever, any kind of medical thing you may need is free for life. So as long as you do retire, if you spend 20 years in the military service, you will retire. And you will retire, and you will get to keep those benefits for the rest of your life. You also get a retirement paycheck for the rest of your life. Now, it's not all your money. It's a percentage of it, depending on how long you were in and what rank you were and stuff. So there's some percentages in there, but you will get it forever, and access to all your medical care as well. The salary range, I think right now you start at about 67,000 a year if you're in a premier band, and if you're in a regional band, it's somewhere around 50 a year. Now, your pay, though, it's interesting you brought up pay, is this money does go a little bit farther than being a civilian, because your pay is broken down into several categories. That lump 67 is what the total you get, but it's broken down into what's called base pay. So the most of your money will be at what's your base pay, and then you also get money for food, and you get money for housing. So those two different things are not taxed. So you have your base pay, which is taxed normally, but then those other monies you get are not taxed. You just get them free and clear. And that ends up going a long way. Here, you also don't have, if you live in Virginia, like I do, you don't have to pay for property tax, which is thousands of dollars a year. So there's lots of things. You also get commissary privileges, which is the commissary is a grocery store that you can shop at, but it's cheaper than most other grocery stores, than any regular grocery store. Every store that you can buy pretty much anything from here gives you a military discount, because DC is like, it's all military, government people, and lawyers, pretty much all live here. So you get huge benefits that way too. The workload. If you're in a concert band, like I was, you have 2-hour rehearsal per day, usually four rehearsals, and then have a concert. You have a concert every week. Every now and then you'll go a week without a concert, but that's not normal. Like, they really are booked very steadily throughout the entire year. And so you'll have typically 4-day rehearsal and then a concert. That is your week. If you're in a ceremonial band, you will play ceremonies, funerals at Arlington Cemetery. We play at the Pentagon quite a bit too, and might be at the White House, other ceremonial functions. You may play at a they call these things patriotic openers, where somebody is having a dinner somewhere and he's hosting people, and you go and bring a small group and you play preliminary music for 20 minutes, and then you play the national anthem at the beginning of their ceremony, and then you leave. And that's a patriotic opener. So another very common ceremony they have here. And then you do concerts. In the summer, it's usually a 5-day commitment, because there's 3 rehearsals a week and then 2 concerts. The first concert will be at the Capitol. Everybody plays at the Capitol on Sunday. The Navy band played there on Mondays. And then for the Navy, they play at Navy Memorial on Tuesdays. So Navy Memorial is down the street from the White House. So it's an outside thing. That concert I showed you earlier of the combined group, that was at the Navy Memorial. So that's a 5-day commitment, but that's it. So the bands do have what they call collateral duties. Every group has this. And I think any civilian, group or organization has one as well, essentially. It's like stuff you have to do that doesn't really necessarily have to do with music. So you may have to, I don't know, you could be the uniform person and you help take people's orders for uniforms when they need new ones, or you may be working with auditions, or you may be working with different departments of the band that necessarily aren't playing. They still would deal with the way the whole place works, but they won't necessarily be playing. And that happens probably for the most of your career. But you do get to live in DC. A lot of the folks, when they first get the job, live in town. Because it's cool to live up there on Capitol Hill, and there's metros and you can drive around. It's a very, very, very cool place to be. There's pretty much any kind of food you could possibly want. It's a great place to be, and a great place. There's lots of gigging here. Most everyone, including myself, gigs on the outside, because you have a lot of freedom here. You play your job, and as long as you're playing well and you're not getting anybody's way at the military, then you're free to play other gigs. So there's lots of regional orchestras around here, and there's lots of gigs. I play a lot of theater down here and playing orchestras. I play in my own steel band that I have going on down here too, which is fun. So you have all that at your disposal as well. Being able to make extra money on the outside of just the military too. And I forgot to mention the vacation. You get 30 days a year of paid vacation, and it actually keeps going if you don't use it. So it carries over to the next year. You don't lose it. You can have up to like 65 days of vacation if you didn't use it for a couple of years. So, but everybody takes advantage of that, and they take vacation everywhere. It's pretty cool. It's very rare. Obviously teachers and stuff have the summer off, but most people who have regular jobs don't get that much time off, particularly when they start, because you get that the minute you start here. So really, really, really cool in those aspects.
Sounds pretty awesome, Stacy.
Yeah, it's a pretty good gig.
You mentioned about for the premier groups about 67,000 in that range or so.
Yeah.
And so for somebody who's been in the group for 20, 25 years before they retire, where would be the top range if you were going to stay that long, roughly?
Oh,
I know it varies.
Right, yeah, it does vary. But if you were going to stay, 25 years or so, I think 30 is the most you can stay. So regardless of when you got in, 30 is the max. and you'd probably be maybe about 120. It goes up every year. The military gets a pay increase, and it goes up every year a little tiny bit. And then when you get promoted, it obviously jumps a much bigger jump. In DC, you can only get promoted 3 grades. So you start off at E6, and you can go 7, 8, and 9, and that's it. That's as far as you can get promoted in the time that you're there, is three pay grades, because everybody here is the same pay grade. It's actually fairly difficult to do because everybody here starts off at the same place. And when you have a year, when there's a promotions, you may have 3 or 4. And then if you got like 90 people who are all the same rank, 3 or 4 takes a long time for people to actually cycle through that. So, but yeah, definitely in the hundreds here in DC. And like I said before, with your money going a longer way, it really works out pretty well for a pretty good life here. So,
And then one final question.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to mess up your presentation.
Not at all.
So,
please.
I mean, if you were going to, probably the one question that seems to come up, the one that I feel sometimes is that, you'll have a great musician, a great student musician, or somebody that wants to audition, and then you'll bring up the military bands, and they're like, I just don't want to be in the military.
Right.
What is it about that you did, that you witnessed, that would fall into that category? Because it sounds like you're a performing ensemble, like 90% or more of your job is just playing the music and performing. What is the mystery of that might be out there that people think, oh, I'm going to have to do some other military duty or something?
I think it's just that word, like military, because like, since you don't know that there's a band, when you see commercials, I mean, they've got their guns, they're on the ground, they're crawling under barbed wire and shooting stuff. And you see like, Marines up there, and the Navy SEALs and all these other special forces guys. And anytime you hear military, all you think is like war. And that's because that's what you see on TV. Like, that is the military. And most people don't realize that this contingency exists. And you're correct. Like, I mean, you play drums. It's all I did. Like I said, I had a couple of those collateral things, little duties that you had to do, but the primary mission is to play drums. And even the leaders, everybody, that's all anybody wants to do is be a musician as best they can. You get a really varied job. You play a lot of different types of things and a lot of different types of venues. You have to be really, really, really well-rounded, and some people don't want to do that. And some people just want to play in an orchestra. And I get the biggest difference between the two is that the bands don't have any strings. And that really is a deal breaker for people sometimes. You don't play Tchaikovsky all the time and all this great lit that you came up learning. You play band music. We play a lot of transcriptions because people love orchestral music. So there's a lot of transcriptions, but you do play band music, which is all woodwinds and brass. So, that can be a deterrent for folks. And also, people don't want to go to boot camp. I've heard that from so many people that that is a deal breaker. I don't want to go to boot camp. Most of the groups, you have to go to boot camp. You don't have to for the Marines, and you don't have to for the Coast Guard, oddly enough. But you do if you want to be in any other band. But to me, it's such a small price to pay for a career in being a performing professional musician. It's only it's about 8 weeks, I think. So it's 2 months. It's a drag, but as long as it's not hard, as long as you pay attention, you're not out there. It's not like you see on TV. You're not crawling around and shooting people, especially shooting weapons and stuff and throwing grenades. The Navy's not like that at all. All I did was learn about ships, forever learn about ships. Oh my gosh, sit in class all day. You have to do some physical fitness stuff, push-ups and sit-ups, and you have to run a bit. And you just have to make sure everything's tidy and folded the way it's supposed to be folded. And, you're just very particular about how all the rules that they say. But beyond that, it's not hard. I mean, everybody gets through it. There's nobody that has like, oh, I have to drop out. I can't take this. I mean, it's not hard. And then you come straight here, and you're all done with that. You do have to wear a uniform. So some people don't like that. That actually comes up a bit. People don't wear a uniform. They'd rather wear tuxedo, which is essentially a uniform, but nobody wants to look like the Marine Captain Crunch guys that you see on the screen. We make fun of them all the time. They got their little lion tamer outfits on. So yes, people just don't like that. And it's hard to dispel that moniker, that's not a viable employment opportunity for folks, because it really is. The guys here are truly professional. And I know I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to skip through quick here to some of the other things we have time for questions with folks. But it's a great opportunity for folks if you entertain it. So fife and drum guys, I'll just run through these real quick. I had a whole thing talked about, so these are the things. Oddly enough, I did want to point this out. If you're going to be a fife and drummer, they have a 30-minute standing assessment, marching assessment. You have to stand there at attention for 30 minutes. That's part of your audition, which is that's just unbelievable to me, but it actually exists because that's what they do is march and stand there a lot. You know, those are the guys on the left, guys that wear the 3-cornered hats over here with the red coats. And again, everybody plays traditional. Everybody plays on a rope drum at some point. It's common. And then specialty groups play all other things. Yes, again, traditional orchestral stuff, but drum set is a primary focus. That is the biggest part of being in a specialty group. Is that's what they hire as a drum set player. The chorus has a rhythm section. They have a bass player and a keyboard player and a drum set player. Same thing with the jazz group. Obviously, they have a rhythm section, and the rock band has same thing. So everybody actually has a rhythm section and their own percussionist and drummer that plays only for that group. Like I said, everybody does ceremonies. But the drummers in those groups only do ceremonies when it's a huge job. Like I said, the inaugural or the White House or something really, really big. Other than that, they never play ceremonies. I mean, they could easily go 2 years and not do a ceremony because they just play drum set. That's their whole gig, to play in their group. And I was going to play some of that. We'll come back if we have time. We'll come back to that. I was going to show a little bit of the combo. We'll play a little bit of it just to show you a little combo group here.
If you're feeling sad and lonely,
This is one of the things that happened during COVID. Obviously, everybody was putting things
I can render. Tell the one who loves you only. I can be so warm and tender. Call me. Don't be afraid. You can call me. Maybe it's late, but just call me. Tell me and I'll be around. Seems your friends desert you. There's somebody thinking of you. I'm the one who never hurt you. Maybe that's because I love you. Call me. Don't be afraid. You can call me. Maybe it's late, so just
cool. I just wanted to show a little of that just so you guys.
Tell me and I'll be around.
The drummer in the chorus.
Now don't forget.
Great tasty player, so they've been
Let me, I will always stay by you.
All right, we move along because I want to talk about some specifics about auditioning here. All right, in the regional bands, have to play a concert etude, have to play mallet solo, and then a lot of times that's your choice. They'll have maybe something specific. If you look on that list that Mark is going to put up in the download for you guys, on one of those there's a regional audition requirement list, and you'll see like they'll tell you play a mallet feature of your own that you want to choose, an etude, and then a bunch of drum set stuff because again, drum set is very, very heavy when you're in regional bands. Now, audition types: audio, video, and a live audition. If you have to do an audio audition, I tell you pros and cons to these. Some people think audio is a great way to do it. I personally think it's harder on the candidate to do an audio audition. And the reason is because the committee has a chance to go back and continue to listen to you. And they're going to hear every little thing that they probably wouldn't have heard the first time, or had you showed up for a live audition, you get one shot to play, they get one shot to write, and that's it. If you ever have a chance to perform live and not send a tape, it's way better because they're not going to go back and continue to listen to mistakes. All right, you have to get in the military. So if you want to be in a band, you have to actually get into the military. And this has actually stopped people from being able to take the job. There's an age requirement. It's different for the different services. You can be 39, I think, in the Navy and still actually get in, which is pretty amazing. Most groups are lower than that, but you can for the Navy. You have to have a certain height-weight ratio. You can't be overweight because it's the military again. You can't have severe medical conditions like asthma or other big, which wouldn't seem to be severe, but it can probably stop you from getting in the Navy. They do a criminal background check, make sure you haven't committed any crimes, felonies, stuff like that. You have to be a citizen. And there are tattoo restrictions, believe it or not. Because the Navy doesn't want tattoos to be visible below certain spots, like in your sleeve and your arm, because a lot of the stuff that military bands in DC particularly do is very high profile and filmed on TV and, with dignitaries from wherever. So they want to make sure everybody has this perfect little look. So there are restrictions to a lot of these things. And don't let this stop you though, if you are interested in a military band audition or job, because you can get a waiver for just about, except for the height, weight, and the age. You can get a waiver for the other ones depending on what you do, because oftentimes they justify that you're going to be here in the band, you're not going out to sea or to war, that's not your job. So they can get waivers and you can still get in by showing the type of job you're going to be doing. So don't let that dissuade you, but just so you know, that does exist. All right, we'll show a little of these guys. This is the fife and drum guys. Pretty cool. Do your research, okay? Biggest thing, I know I'm going to take a few minutes just to talk about these next few slides. You have to do your research. If you want to be in a band of any kind, you have to find them online. You need to check out videos, audio, social media pages. You need to talk to people in the group. You get their list. You need to study how they are and what they do so you can play with these guys. You have to be a part of the section. A little brief here.
Hi, I'm Sergeant First Class Ross Pavoco, and I'm the drum group leader for the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps drum line. This solo is entitled The Adventures of Joe 90. This is a classic drum solo which was written in 1986 by former Corps members Brian Petney and Ross Andrews. And it was kind of during a period of intense change within the Fife and Drum Corps where they were really trying to push the Corps musically. This solo has gained increasing popularity on an international scale as well. We often use it to break kind of that language barrier, specifically at international tattoos, through the use of some great rudimental drum music. As Ross Andrews told me, this solo was meant to be fun, and it was written for drummers by drummers. The title itself came from Brian Petney, who was riding with Ross Andrews on a trip to San Antonio. And it came from a TV show that was on TV at the time entitled Joe 90, which was kind of like a kid's action TV show, and the name just stuck. This is simply solid riding, full of great moments that really embody the spirit of the Old Guard drum line.
Cool. That's the old fife and drum Old Guard. All right. So we'll get through this and we'll have some time for some questions here. Whoops. Oh, what happened? All right. You have to plan yourself out. What do you need to prepare? You got excerpts, drum solo, timpani, everything, appropriate mallet solos, your height, weight concerns. You have to plan out everything that you're going to have to think about, and you have to start to prioritize your life and how you're going to prepare for this. This is the prelim. This is when you get everything ready. And let me really bring out this one right up here, which is sight reading. Every group has sight reading. So you need to practice your sight reading if you're not used to it. You don't have those in orchestral auditions, but you do in the military and it breaks people. So make sure and practice sight reading. I know a guy, the principal in Marine Band's a good friend of mine, lives down, actually oddly enough, down the street from me as well. He told me when he auditioned, almost his entire audition was sight reading, which just seems unheard of, but it's they've modulated now. Obviously, it's much more of an orchestral audition these days, but it really does separate people. So make sure and practice sight reading. The resume and a cover letter. You have to get a resume together for every group, or some sort of letter, a cover letter saying why you want to be in the group. You have to get a letter of intent. That's the same thing kind of as a cover letter. And then recommendations. Some groups require you to get recommendations. You have to do all that early. So this is what I mean by time management. Make sure you ask people to write references for you early so they have time. You have to plan out your time. Think about how long it's going to take you to do everything. Download the music. You know, I would put things on a calendar that you want to do. You know, I'm going to practice this time because if you're in school or you have a job or you have all kinds of shows or a family or anything coming up, you're going to have to manage your time so you have time to make sure it and get everything in that you need to practice. You need to get access to instruments, right? You need to learn what instruments are going to be provided. Most places will tell you, but this is hugely important as well. If they don't tell you, ask them. Which model numbers are you providing? Because you need to get access to those instruments so you can practice on them. If you don't practice on the stuff that they have, that they're going to have, you're not giving yourself a leg up. Okay, it's really, really important. Make sure you get the cuts right too. We've had that too. I don't know how many auditions I've sat on where somebody isn't playing the cut. They're playing the wrong music or they're playing the wrong excerpt or not playing long enough. You know, make sure you get the details right as to what you're going to be auditioning, what the pieces are. Okay, the active preparation stage. That's what I call this. Learn all the music. It takes time, right? Things that you don't know. There's always going to be something you have to learn unless you've played it in band, because every audition is going to have some sort of band music in it, or it's going to have rudimental stuff that you haven't played before, or orchestra lit that may be obscure that you haven't played before. You got to learn all the music. Take lessons. I know people are in school. You're taking lessons with your teacher. Take other lessons. If you have an orchestral excerpt and you live near a place that has an orchestra, go take a lesson with the principal and have him show you how he or she does that. It's important. Take a lesson with a drum set player. Maybe your teacher doesn't play a lot of drum set, or who knows, but like, just make sure you use your resources so you can take lessons with the appropriate people. Obviously your teacher is going to be your first resource to give you lessons of everything that you're going to, all culminating factors, but always take other lessons and garner other opinions too. Set yourself up for a mock audition, play for your colleagues that you respect. You have to play for people that are going to give you critical feedback. You have to use appropriate styles. Now, this is really important, actually. I mean, all these things are important, but this is really important. I want you to listen to this very short little ditty. This is the old guard again, and this is how they play their sevens into downbeats. I hope you can hear that. It's very subtle, but they delay all their sevens. They don't play them right in time. They play them late, and they do it on purpose because that's like characteristic to the fife and drum style. And if they're going to give you music and you're auditioning for this group, and this actually is an open audition right now. This one is the snare drum one. I think the very first one on that list that I have put together for you guys for download. There's an audition for them, and this is very characteristic for what they do. So if you see that in their music, you have to delay that seven. You're not going to know exactly how far, and they don't even care. I was talking to their captain the other day about this very thing. They don't care how long you do it. They just want to know that you're doing it and that you're trying. Of course, when you get with the group, if you win the audition, then it'll be refined and you know exactly what they do. But they want somebody to research and know what kind of culture they're getting involved in and understand how that style is supposed to be. Okay, practice sight reading and practice your interviews. They're going to ask you an interview questions like, why do you want to be in the military band? What do you bring to the table here? What is your thought about, military service? They may ask that. You want to do it musically or whatever. So think about your answers to questions like that. You do have an interview with a commanding officer who's going to ask you questions about why you're doing what you're doing. Every branch has an interview. It's at different stages. Some are at the end, some are in the middle. Everyone has an interview. So that's something you're going to have to think about ahead of time. Mindfulness. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of mindfulness, but it's really cool activity to help with nerves. I have a lot of buddies. A buddy down the street of mine just wrote a book on mindfulness, and it's pretty cool. I actually took a course on it so I could better my playing. All you do is it's about being present. It's about having less distraction and being really honed in and focused on what you're doing at the current time. Being present, it can really help your playing. And record yourself. You have to. If you don't record yourself, you should be doing that anyway. Obviously, in any kind of system where you're actually learning anything musically, you should be recording yourself so you can give yourself some critical evaluations, right? But you have to record yourself, and actually you should play it for other people, because a lot of times when you record yourself and you listen to it yourself, you were listening for that one specific thing that you've been messing up and that you're trying to get right. You're not really listening to the overall package of what you're trying to put together. So record yourself and let people that really respect, that you respect, and listen to it and give you some very critical feedback on what you're playing. It's extremely important so you can make steps forward. And with a lesson piece, you have to take lessons early enough. You can't take a lesson a week before the audition, because you don't have a chance to make adequate changes to what you're playing in order to produce the best result in another week. You need to have time to really change that. All right. Okay. So some of the do's and don'ts. These are the things that are going to make or break you when you actually audition. This goes for live and it goes for recorded round. Keep time. This is the first thing that we are listening for in an audition. the panel. Keep time. It sounds like it's a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many people don't. Keep time. Get a metronome, play along with it, and keep time. Keep time in the rests. That breaks people all the time. People will play a passage. You've got 4 beats out. You got to come back in again. They're early. Almost never late. It's almost always early because people are nervous. Okay? Keep time. It's essential. Second thing, play clean and controlled and clarity with control and clarity. Of course, another one that sounds like a no-brainer, but it's essential. You have to make sure that all of your doubles, any double that you have is crystal clean from the last one, that your hand to hand is very even, that everything is really subdivided on the beat, and you're playing meticulous music with really good control and clarity. And by the clarity piece, it's another one too, especially when it comes to a recorded round. You have to make sure that your instruments are dry, especially like tambourine, snare drum. They can't be ringy because it's not clear on a tape when you're sending it to somebody. Dry up your instruments. An audition is not a performance. It's very important to remember that. You're auditioning. You're not playing with anybody else. You're playing by yourself. If you're in the back of the band, orchestra, and you're playing Carnival Overture or something with real loud tambourine and you can hear that head pop, you can't hear that out in the audience because it doesn't project. It's not the same when you're playing with other people. But when you're by yourself, you can really hear that, and you don't want to. You don't want the jingles to rattle all around. You don't want to hear a floppy head. You don't want the snare drum to ring too much. You want really clean clarity on all these instruments that you're playing. So you have to dry them up for a recording. Bands isn't really going to care. People aren't going to care about like your recording quality. You don't have to go to a studio. People use their phones. And that's totally fine. It just has to be clear. That's the thing. Really, really clear without a bunch of extraneous stuff going on. When you make a recording too, make sure that there's not sirens going on in the background. Make sure that your cat's not meowing or something like that. Make your recording very, very, very clear and clean. All this goes towards being a professional because that's what everybody in the bands up here is looking for. They want a professional. They don't want somebody who they think isn't going to be paying attention to the details because that's what that will imply to them. They want a professional. So always make sure things are really, really clean and in tight. Always think musically too. We've had a bunch of remember stuff on the last audition that came out. People said it was flat. They kind of play Bach really flat. I've heard that from a number of guys on the panel. You need to play Bach with expression and phrase. Matter of fact, marimba solos, that's your chance. That's how everybody in the bands will view that. On the committee will view that's your chance to be expressive musically. That's when you can really show what you're doing. You got to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to be who you are. You got to show what you are musically, all within a contextual framework. Obviously, it's not the Wild West. You can't just start doing crazy stuff out there, but you still have to show who you are and how you are going to separate yourself from other people. Be musical. Take a lesson with a cellist or a lute player or a violinist if you're playing Bach under those particular, those instruments. You don't have to be a percussionist. Take a lesson with somebody that knows all that stuff really well. They can help you with phrasing. Really important. Use your resources, like I said before. Play with recordings. You have to play with the recording too. You have to, even if you're playing along with the person in the recording, it doesn't have to be music -1, but it's essential that you do that. Because I can't tell you how many auditions I've sat on where it's really clear that the person playing in front of me has no idea how it really goes with the orchestra or with the piece. They've never played it in context. They don't really get it in context. They're just playing a bunch of notes out there because you don't feel it when you hear them doing that. So make sure you're playing along with recordings. Essential. Play along, listen back with recordings too. Okay, you have to have the proper feel. It's extremely important. Missing the multiple recordings, that too is important. And that goes actually more in line with the drum set players. And everybody too, but the drum set players, a lot of times drum set players don't win auditions because they can't adapt. This is going to happen in a live round. You get to the live rounds, they're going to ask if the panel asks you, hey, can you play that slower? Can you play that softer? Can you play that more lyrically? Can you play that, with more lilt? And then the drum set player, can you play that in Latin style? Can you play that more swing? We really want to feel the groove on 3. We don't want to feel it on 1. So can you change and do that? If you can't adapt, if you can't change the way that you're thinking about your playing from that standpoint, you will not win the job, especially the drum set players. We've had a lot of players that come in. They're fantastic. These guys can ram notes left and right. They play great. And you can tell they're just like fantastic actual players. Yet they haven't done their research enough, and they not able to adapt, and they just don't fit in with the group that they're playing. There's no communication. They're not looking at people. They're not making sure they're connecting with the group that they're playing. They're really into that too. Connection with the people you're playing with. Look around. You can't just be so focused on that. You got to really know what's going on. So multiple styles and recordings too. Play the right tempos. Obviously, you got to play the tempos right. You can't be too slow or too fast, but you have to, obviously, under the guise of being really, really clean. So if you do find something that's like you can't quite play it clean as you'd like to, then play it a little bit slower so you can. Let the committee ask you to play a little bit faster. That's okay. You know, it's more important that you play clean than it is that you play super fast and try to get through everything. And I know some people really think that, like, when the committee has a comment about their playing, they get super nervous. They're like, oh no, you know, they don't like what I'm doing. Exactly the opposite. The committee will not comment to you if they don't already think you've got something to offer. If they think that you don't, then they won't say anything and you'll just be gone. But if they think that you do, they might ask you something. Can you play that this, like the different ways that you can kind of play it? Really, really important to be able to adjust to what they're saying. And the last thing on there is play the right notes. This is on a tape round. If you're on a tape round, you have to play the right notes. They won't forgive that. They'll say, why didn't he just tape it again? Like, why would you play a wrong note and send a wrong note? That's the vibe that everybody's going to think. So play the right notes. Don't miss any right notes, or just take it, or just do it again. When you're live, it's different. You get one shot to do it. Everybody knows you might miss a note. We're not a robot. So that's different when you're live. But on a recording, they won't be okay with it. And just so you know, the committee, I put rarely, made up of only percussionists. I don't know if I've ever seen a committee that was only percussionists ever, anywhere. They're made up of other people. They want you to be a musician. Okay, it's not just about ramming notes and playing drums. It's about being a quality overall musician. Extremely important. So all these keys, these little points are really things that are going to separate you from other folks if you follow them. Some of the don'ts. Don't procrastinate. Seen that too many times too. Oh, the audition is 5 months from now. I'll get to it. You will fail. Start right when you find out there's an audition, and take your time to actually actively prepare for it. Don't procrastinate. Don't overplay. This goes back to what I was saying before, that you're playing by yourself. You're not with an ensemble. It's different. You don't have to play so loud. Like, you can go from mezzo piano or from pianissimo to fortissimo pretty easily and still get a good sound out of the drum or whatever instrument you're playing without overplaying. You don't want to hear overplay. They'll ask you to play louder if they want you to really play louder. But that's definitely broken people from our auditions too, is people that just play like crazy loud. It doesn't need to be that way. Don't overplay. Like I talked about, missing notes. Don't neglect the part of the audition. That's important too, because sometimes you'll get people that come to the audition and they'll play, oh, the mallet stuff is great. The snare drum stuff is great. We got the cymbal stuff is good, but I'll get to the tambourine. And they kind of fluff through it because they think they got good hands and fast hands. They can play it all. And then tambourine's not clear. They're not in time. You just don't play the tambourine well. And accessories will break you. Like, you have to have everything polished, which is why you have to allow so much time. Really important. And the last couple of things, don't apologize. Don't feel like you have to play like somebody else. That's why I say that. Sometimes people are like kind of demure and like, I got to fitting in and playing like somebody else are two different things, right? You have to fit in, but at the same time, you got to be yourself. You have to have something that you're going to offer that group, and don't hesitate to ask any questions. If anything pops up that you're unsure about, ask somebody. Ask your teacher. If you can reach out to somebody in the group, ask them. It's important. I mean, all that stuff goes hand in hand. All right, so recorded round, we talked about that a little bit. And like I said, they want to know that you're a professional. They don't want to bring anybody to the group that they have to train. They want to know that you're a professional. Okay, so you have to be polished when you show up and you're playing. You got to make sure your instruments sound great and that you're clear, very clear. You have to have a good sounding snare drum, a good sounding drum set, tune your drums. You have to have good sounding cymbals, get the right cymbals for the gig, a really good sounding everything. Make sure that all the instruments sound really good. That's independent of the recording quality. That's just the actual instruments. If you can, and when you're going to show up to a live audition, which we'll talk about in a second, make sure, the Marine drum, make sure you're playing with appropriate styles, like I'll talk about with that 7. Okay, make sure and listen to how the group does specific things so you can fit in with that group. And for the live rounds, make sure they're oftentimes behind a screen. Most times, all Navy Band ones are behind a screen. So they'll set you up. You won't even talk. I could run through the whole audition process, but you'll be in there. You'll play through your excerpts right in a row for the prelim round, and then you'll leave. The proctor will come in and say, hey, this is candidate number 46. And it'll take you 5 minutes to play through, and then you will leave, and then they'll advance you or they won't. So that's kind of how all that works.
Stacy, I'm gonna jump in on you just for a minute, because we have about 5 minutes or so left, and
okay.
And the students probably have like a million questions, because these things that Stacy's talking about, clearly he's emphasizing the military ensembles, but they would apply for any audition, really. I mean, there's just a few minor points that may only be for the military bands, but really, I would say 98% or more are with the Any audition. So Jacob's got a question. Go,
Oh,
Jacob.
please. Yeah, I'm sorry I ran so long here.
Why don't we take the screen off, Stacy, if you don't
yeah,
mind?
let me do that. How do I stop share? All right, there we go. Let's move you over here. Yeah, and I can stay on longer if you guys need to. I'm sorry I ran so late. I meant to leave lots of time for questions, but go ahead.
Awesome. So I have a question for you, Mr. Loggins. So when talking about like reference letters or letters of recommendation, do you get new letters every audition? So if you audition in January, are you getting a letter in December, or will you get a letter and then use that for maybe a couple months or a couple different auditions?
You could use that for, yes, definitely different auditions. They don't need to be different ones for each one. Just depends on which audition you're going to. That it should be, the only difference would be is if you're doing an audition that's completely different from the first one, and then you'd want the letter to be more specific to the one that's coming up. But if they're similar auditions, then no, you can absolutely use the same one.
And Jacob, I can speak to just from someone in my role, for example. Let's say that Stacy's auditioning and I write a letter for him. I don't just throw that letter away. I have that letter. So when he says, hey, I'm doing this other audition, I just modify that letter to focus on that particular audition. So it's not like you're going back to your resources time and again and they have to start all over again. Most of us, I would assume, do the same way that I do, is, we keep a file of those letters for those individuals.
Cool. Sure thing. Christian.
Hello. Earlier you had mentioned a little about, in interviews, presenting yourself and being like, this is why I would like to join, whatever this band is. So I guess my question to you is, what is your connection? Why did you want to join the Navy band, or just, join the service, I guess?
That's an awesome question. And it's kind of funny because I didn't have a thought about being in a military band at all when I started. Was not on my radar. I was like, oh, I'm probably going to go, hopefully I'll go to graduate school again. I'll get my DMA. And then I would like to teach percussion at a college somewhere. That was like my path that I thought would be pretty cool. And then somewhere in my second year of graduate school at ECU, I was like, I think maybe I want to perform. And I was looking through, back then there was no internet, we were in the office looking through job recommendations on in a notebook, I remember. And I was flipping through this 3-ring binder and I saw Navy band. I was like, huh. And I saw DC. I was like, man, because I didn't want to just audition for anybody. I'm like, the DC band's up the street. It's like 4 hours from here or whatever. And it's the top group. So, I'll give that a shot. So I thought, you got to be in the military, but I can do that, whatever. It's probably not that big a deal. So then I did, and it worked out, and I did it ever since. But there was no aspiration to actually be in the military per se. It was all about music for me, and it still is. The military band is an outlet for the music. It's a different way to do it. It's not like I'm joining the military, we joked about it. Everybody in the band pretends they're not really in the military. I mean, they're very loose, free form. You get those two words, military and music. I'm not sure they really link up so well, do they? Right? You get your free performer and then the rigid structure of the military that you have to adapt to. But most people in the band are pretty loose about that. We're just making music and you got to put a uniform on. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Jesse.
I was wondering if you or anyone that you worked with that has been in a military band ever got in and then was like, oh, not that into it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that happens all the time. People because the military structure sometimes does get people. Most people are cool with it and don't care so much, but some people really can't handle it. I mean, they just get out. It does happen for sure. Because sometimes it can be too much, no job is roses all the time. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I really liked the job. I thought it was great, but I mean, everything's got its drawbacks. I mean, sometimes the military would just get in the way. You get called, you got to come in. There's something they call urinalysis for the military. They got to make sure everybody hasn't been taking any things they're not supposed to, to any drugs or anything like that. So, they'll call, and it has to be a surprise because they got to make sure they catch you if that's the case. And they'll call you at 6:30, 7:30 in the morning. You got to come in by 9. You could have had plans that day or whatever. Nope. You're going in. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff happens with the military and they own you. I mean, they do. It's not, you can't get out of it. It's a contract you sign for your 4 years or whatever. And you keep redoing a contract as you extend, but they tell you where to go whenever you want to go. They make you do what they want to do. I mean, it's the military. You're not really in any control. We play music. It's awesome, but you don't control any of where they tell you to go. you know. But I will tell you, you know what? My very first job. Has anybody here seen Clear and Present Danger? That movie with Harrison Ford. You probably, I'm old, so like it was a movie that, yeah, see, you're more. It came out a long time ago. That was my first job. I was in that movie. Harrison Ford was in it, and a bunch of other folks, and James Earl Jones, and a lot of famous people. And the scene was he died and he got buried at Arlington Cemetery, and I played in the band when he was getting buried. So all the people were there. It was literally my first job. But this job is awesome. It's pretty funny. So, but it is not for everybody. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Jesse, I think that also that would be true of almost every job that you could even think about in music. I mean, how many people have gotten to college teaching and go, whoa, this really isn't for me, you know, and they'll leave or go someplace else, or maybe they're teaching at the high school level or whatever, you know, like it could be lots of different avenues for employment in music that don't fit your personal, you know, desires of really who you are, what you want to do long life, but it may look really cool on the outside. And so that's not a negative, it's just reality. And regarding wearing uniforms or whatnot, I've played so many shows where they tailor make your, you know, I did this one thing in Nashville for 3 years or so. I mean, they make your uniform. They won't even let you bring a tuxedo. They're going to make a tuxedo, and you have to wear this one if you want this job. Of course, we all put it on. We're like, whatever, you know, let's wear the tuxedo. So, you know, wearing a uniform or tuxedo or whatever is, I don't know, it's just kind of part of the gig, you know, of playing music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you don't do it for that long. There's a lot of times, I mean, there's a lot of freelance opportunities here. I mean, if the jobs here in particular are pretty sweet. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to express and be musicians, man. Really cool. And a lot of great folks here. I have a lot of dear lifelong friends that are all fantastic players in all these groups, which is cool. And I would agree with, as I was trying to, I'm not sure I got all through this whole, the whole clinic like I wanted to, but all these concepts for auditioning really do translate to any time that you would want to audition for any ensemble. I mean, it really does work if you plan and do your research. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
How many people are usually on the committee for auditions, and what kind of
fumble?
What kind of instruments or do the committee members usually play, and are the auditions live?
So yes,
blind. Sorry, blind auditions or I guess
depends on the group. So I speak to the Navy, obviously that I did that. They're all screened, so they're behind a screen. The entire audition, actually, they don't come out at any point. The panel is made up of all the percussionists that aren't working that day, because sometimes there's, you know, funerals or whatever ceremonies going on, so not everybody can make it. But whoever can comes. So you'll have probably six or seven. There's 10 in the percussionists in the group, so you'll have maybe about seven, and then you'll have the unit leader. That's the person who's in charge of the concert band. He or she will be there. Currently, that person's an oboist. You'll have the chief in charge. That's what the title is. That's the person who runs the whole department, the concert and the ceremonial group combined. That person's a horn player. You'll have the guy from the XO of the command, who's essentially the assistant conductor. You'll have the conductor will be there, and then you'll also have the senior enlisted leader, which is a guy who he's a managerial guy, but he plays trombone. So you'll have all those wind players. Usually there's always a woodwind player. If it's an orchestra, there'd be string players, and then you'd have your concert master and several others from different sections. So they'll run the gamut of different people in the committee. And that's important to note, because they're really they're listening for expression. They don't know the ins and outs of the technical stuff that you play. They have no idea. You know, they hear a snare drummer playing some stuff like, hey, he sounds like the last guy. They don't know. You know, but they will listen for like phrasing, and they will listen for musicality and marimba playing and xylophone playing, and they will hear when somebody's playing flat, even if it's snare drum or if they're not. So it's important to note that they're there. Some of the other groups don't have screened auditions. Marine Band, they do for part of it, but then the last half of it, they bring the screen down and they look at you. All of the small groups where you're playing drum set, the specialty groups, never screen. Ever. You're playing with the group the entire time. The only time you would ever play by yourself is when you send an audio tape or videotape in for them to review and invite you. And if you pass that round, then you get invited. They usually only invite like 3 people to the finals. You know, if it's a concert band audition, they may invite 5 to 10 to the finals if they had a recorded round, but they don't invite very many people. And the entire time you'll play with the group. They even have writing. One of the groups will you'll play, and then they'll give you a recording and a piece of paper, and they send you out into another room for like a half hour, and they want you to write, or an hour, write all your notes and all this stuff, and then when you come back and play it with them. You know, that's part of their audition. They have sight reading. Everybody has sight reading. Sight reading is enormous. Like, I don't know, people quite do it enough, but a lot of the jobs you play in the band, you don't rehearse. You know, you rehearse for concerts. You know, the biggest concerts the bands do rehearse for maybe 2 weeks. That's like and then at the end of 2 weeks, everybody's like, oh, can we stop playing this stuff? You know, because like 2 weeks is like a really long time for rehearsing, you know. Most concerts are 1 week, 3 or 4 days, you know, because they expect you to be prepared. You know, when you show up to the first rehearsal, I can play all my notes. You know, I know how it goes. I'm like, we're not working through it. I got it down. So like on the third day, I'm like, I'm good. You know, and 2 weeks later, you're like, really, come on, can we stop playing this stuff? It's like really get to me. But there's sight reading. So we play a lot of concerts or things. You'll show up and they'll be like, all right, we're going to go to the gig. They pass out flip folders and you read. We don't rehearse. You just read. You show up to the Pentagon, you know, if there's visiting somebody from another country, you show up to the job probably a half hour early, and we'll play through their national anthem a couple of times because that's required, you know, when you play at the Pentagon for whoever's coming. And you'll read through that just to make sure everybody's square on the notes and the form. It's usually the forms with anthems that's weird because there's a lot of repetition. You never know where you're going, but then you're good. You go and play the gig. You know, concerts are really the only thing we rehearse for, but we don't rehearse for ceremonies. Yeah, like ever. Yeah. But yeah, the screen, only some behind the screen, some with the screen. Yeah, but the drums, if you're a drum set player, man, that's like your bread and butter is going to be getting in there and really, really connecting with the group. So they are really keen on people like paying attention to what's going on around them and really being able to communicate with them. They want the drum set player to lead. They don't want him following people. They want him to lead. They want to get eye contact with him. They want to make sure he knows the music through and through so that he's able to get away from the page and actually really get into it. They're like so focused on that. And you'll get to the end of the audition and be like, well, why didn't you like that guy? Well, it just didn't feel right. You know, I don't know how many times I've heard those guys, the bass player in particular, be like, man, it just doesn't feel right. You know, he's not looking at me. I don't know. He doesn't know what he's not playing. He can't adapt. We want him to play a little slower. He can't. You know, we want him to do this. He can't. You know, you need to be able to make your changes too with what you're doing as well. So a lot goes into that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stacy. We're about out of time here.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for sharing all this information for us. And it's pretty easy to see that Stacy is very dedicated and passionate about what he's talking about here. And those are the kinds of people that you want to work with. Those are the kinds of people you want to be around in your ensembles. And for all the military groups I've heard through my years, they always have great people, really great musicians, and, you know, just fun people to be around and play music with, of course. So bravo to you on a wonderful career. And thank you so much for sharing with us. First thing I would tell you to do is download that handout that we mentioned because it's extensive. Use it as a resource. And of course, Stacy's already given you his email address. It'll be in the video when you're able to see that, of course, as well, if you have any follow-up questions whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay. Anytime. Let's hear it. Let's give a nice
thank you guys.
virtual applause for Stacy Loggins. Now, listen, in about an hour, Jihei Jung will be with us, a premier marimbist of our time. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have some students that are going to play for her. I have in my notes that Christopher Natal is going to perform. I believe you're playing a recording, Chris. Sophia Lowe is going to perform. And I have in my notes, Curtis is going to play. Curtis, is that correct?
Yep. Mine will be a recording, though, if that's okay.
That's all good. What's the piece?
Time for Marimba.
Very good. Very good. Is there anybody else that had submitted to play for Jihei that I didn't mention?
I was going to play Professor Ford.
Wonderful. And what is that piece?
Dance on a Shadow Mirror.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't you plan on going first? Okay, Wyatt? All right. And then and you're playing live, right? Yeah. Okay. And then Chris and Curtis are videos. So Chris, why don't you go next? And then Sophia, you're playing live, correct? So you'll go third. And then Curtis, you can play the video. So we'll do a live video that way. Okay? Excellent. Guys, it's going to be awesome. Everybody take a break, get a cup of coffee, sandwich, whatever floats your boat. Okay. We'll see you back in an hour. Thank you again, Stacy.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.